Hello, everybody, and welcome to your webinar today, which is all about Culture Club, where we build teams, where ideas flourish. So I'm just going to actually, first I'm going to see where everyone's styling in from because I did ask where people were zooming in from. So we've got from North East Scotland. Welcome, sunny Cambridge. Yeah, it's nice to see a bit of sunshine today. Hopefully, sign that spring is on the way. Yorkshire. Oh, Belgium. Hi, nice to see you. Essex, Herefordshire. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Great to see people from all over the country. That's what we like to see. So we will get started. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just bear with me one moment. So today we're going to be looking at Culture Club, where we're building teams where ideas flourish. So how do we build teams where we harness the power of inclusivity to generate creativity within our team? So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to be looking at what makes an inclusive culture and how we can help drive creativity in your team, because we know creativity is key to innovation and helping drive organizations forward. We're going to explore psychological safety, what it is and how we build it in your team, and then looking at things that we can do to coach and empower our teams to be creative. So to get us started, I'm going to show two statements. The first statement I'm going to show, what I want you to do is, I'll get the chat down. When I share the statement, I want you to say whether you think it's true, whether you think it's false, or you're not really sure. Normally what we do, I could see your faces, I'd say throw your hands up in the air if you think it's true, and sort of hover if you're not sure. However, I can't see you all, so we won't be doing that one right now. So I'm going to share the first statement. So brains differ depending on assigned gender at birth. What do we think? Do we think that's true? Do we think that's false? Or you're not sure? It'd be great to see what people's thoughts are in the chat. In terms of what you think. Brains differ depending on assigned gender at birth. What do people think to that? Whether it's true or false? False, true. Oh, so some mixed thoughts. Yeah, false, brilliant. Thanks for everyone for sharing your thoughts. Yeah, about even between true and false. So actually, interestingly, what some researchers have found is that male brains have slightly more white matter than female brains, but actually that doesn't make too much difference for at birth. So that, yeah, male brains are have slightly more white matter. But as we know, it doesn't matter how big your brain, it's what you do with that brain and how we harness the power of our brain. And then what we also know is once hormones kick in with men and women, that can impact sort of drive behaviours. So that is partly true, yes. So next one, our genes play the biggest role on our intelligence and is something that can be changed. So our genes play the biggest role on our intelligence and it isn't something that can be changed. So essentially what it's saying is, are we born with our intelligence? Is our intelligence set from birth? What do we think? True or false again? So true, we've got some truths, some false, yeah, oh, okay, yeah, false, yeah, brilliant. So a bit more slightly on the false side, I think, this time from what I can see. So yeah, that is actually false. So while we know that genetics do play some role, great research by Carol Dweck, who came up with this whole theory of growth mindset, found that actually with effort, our intelligence can increase. So while obviously genetics will play some role, we do have the power, and the beauty of emerging research from neuroscience is we do have the power to increase our intelligence by studying and reading. So it's not necessarily set, which is really exciting because it shows that we can all develop our intelligence. So great. And then just a final one, which I like, is wearing Crocs is wrong unless you are gardening. This is a big debate at Laughology. I am a big Croc lover. I love my Crocs. So other people in the team do not love Crocs so much. So what are people's thoughts? Okay, true. Okay, quite a lot. This should never be worn. Okay, true. So quite a lot of people. I don't have many fellow Croc fans. Just wrong. Okay. I can say, yeah. Okay, quite a lot of people there agree with that statement. But I mean, ultimately, there is no right or wrong, is there, with wearing Crocs? It's whatever your viewpoint is and your experiences. So I live in the Lake District, and actually, Croc wearing is pretty normal and very handy when you're doing outdoor swimming. They're very handy when you have wet feet. Um, so it all depends on your experience. And again, thinking of inclusion and diversity and creative thinking, there's no such thing necessarily as wrong. It's exploring different ideas and stepping into literally different shoes. Maybe try wearing a pair of Crocs and see if that transforms your viewpoint. So yeah, some little statements to get us warmed up and to get us really thinking about our perceptions, where they come from, and just different viewpoints and where they come from. So I'm going to move on then. So why inclusion? Why do we need inclusion? Why is it important? I'm just going to have a quick look at that. Similar to pineapple on pizza? Yes, it is indeed, Heather, definitely. So why inclusion? Why is inclusion important? Well, we're going to go on and look. So I've got three percentages here: 70%, 87%, 63%. And these all are related to organisations and inclusion. Anyone want to take any wild guesses on what those percentages might mean? What they could mean in terms of inclusion and diversity? Anyone want to take a shot at that? Pop it into. Anyone feeling brave to take a risk? What could the 70, 87 and 63% mean in terms of inclusion and diversity in organisations? Anyone? Don't worry if not, we're about to find out. So the power of inclusion and diversity is that organisations that are diverse are 70% more likely to capture new markets. Organisations that are inclusive and diverse are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. And diverse teams are 87% better at making decisions. They are also 19% likely to make 19% higher revenue than other teams. And companies that have an equal number of men and women manage to produce 41% of higher revenue. And the 63% is, they sort of say 63% across all generations say they value and prioritize DEI when they're looking at organizations. So what we know is all the research and all the stats show us that diverse organizations, and not only diverse, but actually have a culture of inclusion, perform better on many different levels in terms of better decision making, higher revenues, and managing to engage different markets. So really, as well as it being ethically right, it makes business sense to be diverse and embrace that in organizations. And we'll come on to look at why that might be as we go through. So what's the difference between inclusion and diversity? So diversity is very much about having people that are, I'm just going to see what you put, not happy with their employer's approach to inclusion. Oh, I like that. As I say, the 87% was they're better making diverse organisations are 87% better at making decisions. Retention ideas, brilliant. So thank you, Dawn and Andrew, for sharing. So diversity, what is diversity? So it describes the traits and characteristics that make people unique. And it's great to have diversity in organisations. As we said, it shows that the organisations perform better. But the key thing is you might have diversity, but if you don't create a culture where people feel included and they feel like they belong, you're not going to harness the power of that diversity. What we know from research is the more diverse organisations are, the higher the collective intelligence of organisations. And what that means is we have, I don't know where that's just gone. We have, when you have collective intelligence, it covers your blind spots. You can have much more diverse viewpoints and perspective, and can challenge viewpoints and perspectives. And particularly thinking about how they harness different markets. If you have different diverse customers, do your team represent the customers that you're serving? Do they know what their needs are? So diversity is the traits that make people unique, but the inclusion bit is a really important part. That's the bit about actually how do we make everyone feel valued and feel that they belong and feel like their contribution is important to their organisations. And sometimes you can have diversity, but without the inclusion, where people don't feel that sense of belonging. So that is really important. And we're going to look as we go through about how inclusion and diversity can be really key to creating creative organisations that are innovative and can really think outside the box. But first, before we do that, we're going to have a look at the things that can stop creativity and innovation from happening. So we've got a few things here. So multitasking, it is a myth that multitasking gets things done more. Research shows that actually single track focus, when our brain is scattered over lots of different things, it can actually prevent us being creative, because our brain cannot focus on tasks. Being tired, stress and pressure on our brain, that can put us into a fight or flight state, and our brains creativity just won't flow. And then the other thing, interestingly, is familiarity and friendship groups. So being around people that think like you and do the same thing as you, because what actually happens then is you're not getting anyone come in with different ideas and challenging your viewpoint. And when we are challenged in a constructive way, it can really help build that creativity. So if we're always around the same people doing the same thing, it can actually stunt our creativity. And then having time constraints, again, a bit sort of like tired and stress and pressure, it can put pressure on our thinking, and we don't feel so able to think freely. There's some things that can inhibit creativity and innovation. And there's also some other things. So anyone ever been in a meeting and you're thinking, I really want to share this idea. I really want to share this idea, but I'm not sure. I feel a bit worried. I feel a bit scared. And so you hold back sharing that thought. And then somebody else will come out and they'll say the thing that you were going to say. And you're like, why didn't I say that thing? And that's an example of sort of how we can stop ourselves. So again, with creativity, lack of confidence, the fear of taking risks, fear of being silly, fear of messing up. Maybe sharing ideas and thinking, oh, they're silly ideas. When we're thinking about creativity, there's no such thing as a silly idea, because actually the more we put in the pot when we're sort of trying to problem solve or thinking about doing something new, you never know who might be inspired by that viewpoint. And so we know that when we feel not safe, or we feel like we're going to be made to look silly, it can stop us from stepping forward, stop us from asking questions, stop us from trying new things. We don't offer new ideas. Essentially, we get sort of stuck in a bit of fixed thinking, if you like, and that can hold us back. And if we've got a whole team that maybe feel like that, it's going to stunt the creativity of an organisation. And so, how do we sort of change that? How can we challenge that? How can we support people so that they don't feel like actually if they share ideas they're going to look silly? How can we encourage people to ask questions and try new things? So a fundamental part in terms of creating creative cultures and also inclusive cultures, they kind of go hand in hand. Something we call psychological safety. And psychological safety may be a bit of a buzzword, but it's essentially about how do people feel in the organisation? Do they feel like they can take risks? Do they feel like they can ask questions without fear of judgment? Do they feel like actually their role and purpose in the organisation is clear? Do they know what they're doing? Is there clear communication? And is there that growth mindset so that we're all growing together? And actually, we know that as we try new things and as we're learning, we sometimes might make mistakes. And that's okay. What we're going to do, though, is when we make those mistakes, we're going to stop, we're going to reflect and learn from those things and be better. And actually, within that, how do we encourage curiosity? So if someone's got an idea or they want to try something new, we'll explore that and see see where that takes us. That might take us down a new product. It might enable us to open up to a new set of customers. And then in sort of psychological safe organisations, it's all about how we collaborate. So we make time, we work together, we don't sit in our silos and don't bother anybody else. We actively go out and speak to other people. We speak to people that are maybe different from us and can give us a different viewpoint. And we also make time to have fun, because we know that when teams have fun together, it's really bonding, really connecting. And actually, when we have fun, that can really be a great tool for generating creativity as well. And as I said, in psychological safe organizations, it's safe to speak up. So when we're in a meeting, there'll be no such thing as a silly question, no such thing as a silly idea. Everyone's encouraged to share, and everyone's appreciated and valued for their thoughts. And equally, it's okay to show vulnerability and maybe think, actually, I'm not sure about this, or can someone just go through this with me? And there's an active listening. And really, in a psychological safe culture, this is where inclusion comes in, because actually everybody is valued for who they are and the contributions that they make towards that team, and everyone's rewarded and recognized for the positive things that they contribute. And I should say that psychological safety is a fundamental to high performing teams, and there was some research that Google did years ago. It's called the Aristotle Project, and they went and studied 180 teams in terms of what made them a high performing team. And psychological safety came out as a really paramount foundation to high performing teams. So I guess there's something there about maybe reflecting on your team right now. And actually, what do you have a learning culture? How do your team learn from the mistakes that they make? How do you encourage that curiosity when someone says to you, oh, what about this? Do we go down and actually open up the door and go, let's explore this a bit more? Do you make time for the team to spend time together, just chatting and sharing ideas? And actually, not just your team, but you actively go out to the other teams in your organization and find out what they're doing and share ideas with them. And then do you create a space where people can speak up and share and show vulnerability and take risks without fear of being shamed, but actually understanding that that's a part of the process? And is everyone clear of their role and purpose, not just individually, but as a team, and have those regular opportunities for communication? So yeah, just have a sort of a little reflect on that in terms of your team and where you're at. So psychological safety, really fundamental in terms of inclusivity, but also when we go on to think about creativity as well in our organisation. So I'm going to move on. So it'd be great to hear actually, where do you feel you're most creative? Where do you have your best ideas? Because often it's probably not at your desk, I can say. So if anyone have any ideas or know where their best ideas come from, please share in the chat. I'm going to share a little. I'm going to share a little story actually while I do that. So for me, I know that my best ideas in the shower. Oh, a couple of in the shower or at 3 a.m. Oh, I hope you have a diary by your bed then. For those in the shower, lots in the. Are you having showers together? How sharing ideas? Walking, driving when you have the music on loudly, nice when you're walking. Yeah, interesting. So all of those are away from the desk. Really interesting. Once you've been fed, yes, fuel helps us have good ideas, fueling the creativity with others. So as I said there, yeah, it's very rarely is at our desk, and also often where we find the problem may not be where we're going to find the creative idea. And actually what we sometimes need to do when we need to get creative is remove ourselves from a situation, go for a walk, clear our heads, and it almost gives us our heads space then for new ideas to come in. I know for me, one of the best places I get my ideas is out running. And one place that I used to work, it became a bit of a, my director used to sort of be like, I've gone for a run and I've got an idea, and the director would be like, oh, because he couldn't handle all the ideas that he didn't know what to do with all the ideas that I had. So thinking about that in terms of your organisation and your team is actually, how can you mix up what you do rather than having the meeting in the office? Could you go to a local park and get creative there? Could you go for walking talks and really sort of beginning to mix up how you do things? Because also what we know is the power of moving can really help change our mindset and help us come unstuck, particularly when we're sort of problem solving. I've got another comment in the chat. They just pop up at any time, any place. Oh, brilliant. I love that, Karen. So yeah, so that's really thinking about how can you really get yourself in the best place? Where are those places that you really get those ideas? And ultimately what it's about is where does your head get space for ideas to come in? And so thinking about your teams and what can we do for our teams? How can we sort of almost coach them to come up with creative ideas? So all about the power of questions and the questions that we ask our teams. So curious questions and growth thinking. So sometimes we might unintentionally, thinking if we're tired or we're stressed, someone might suggest an idea, and then you might go, oh well, why would we do that? Or we've done it, those fatal words, we've done it this way for years. I remember going into an organization and I was there to set up the learning and development department, and so that meant we have to do things differently. And I would go around and I'd ask, why do we do things this way? And I'd always get the response, the fatal response, how we've always done it. And I would have to challenge and be like, well, just because we've done it this way doesn't mean it has to be this way. Times change and we need to keep on top of change. And actually, if we want to progress the organisation, we're going to have to do things differently. So yeah, thinking about how you're responding to your team members and the ideas that they have. And actually, are we asking our teams for their ideas? So curious questions, the power of curious questions. And when we are wanting to be creative, what do other people do? How can we learn from other people that are doing this really well? How could we do this even better? Who are doing similar things? And even things like, actually, if we had no barriers, what would we do? So really, it's all about broadening those mindsets, those questions to stimulate what is possible rather than not what's not possible. So, when you go into a meeting, actually stopping and thinking, how can I engage the knowledge and harness the power in the room? So what we know about inclusion and diversity is that power of diverse thought. So research shows that when we harness the power of collective intelligence and bring different viewpoints, we can actually stimulate more creativity. But in order to do that, we need to have that psychological safety, as we talked about, that foundation where people feel safe to speak up and share without the fear of being silly. But then it's also about how we ask those questions. How are we engaging our team members? Because I'm a firm believer that all the problems, or solutions to our problems exist within your organisation. It's just about how we harness the power of the knowledge within our teams. So yeah, really thinking about curious questions, a great way to coach our teams in terms of being creative. So open questions. And even have fun with it. What would your favourite superhero do in this situation? I have said Wonder Woman is my favourite superhero, and sometimes when I'm faced with a problem, I would sometimes think, what would Wonder Woman do? In the past, I used to think, what would Oprah do? And someone actually brought me a set of pens which actually said, what would Oprah do? And it was a bit of fun, but actually it helped me in those situations when I felt a bit stuck, just to think about what would someone else think about this situation, and really encouraging me to stand in the shoes of someone else to prompt my thinking. So yeah, have some fun with curious questions with your team, using them to coach your team around creativity. So moving on then, so we're thinking about those curious questions, but also humour, the power of humour. We are Laughology, we love a bit of humour. How can humour help us with creativity and our teams? Well, number one, we know that humour is a great connector for teams. Teams that laugh together, it really helps build those bonds. And there's something humour really interestingly can do is challenge something called functional fixedness. Now, functional fixedness is a form of bias where basically what happens is let's say we've got a piece of rope. All we can see with functional fitness would say, I can only use this rope to tie a knot, for example. We get very set in viewing objects as and a chair. We only sit on chairs. We don't use it for anything else. And this is something that as we get older, we can get quite fixed in our thinking about. Is 5-year-olds don't have any functional fixedness because they haven't been conditioned in the way that adults have. So they'll look at objects. That's why they're brilliant. They have so much curiosity and will go in and create dens out of anything. But some research that was done by a psychologist around how humour can help you overcome the functional fixedness. So what this psychologist did was she got a group of people and she gave them a candle, some blue tack, and a bit of rope. And she said, basically, I want you to put this candle on the wall but you can't have any of the wax dripping down to the bottom of the table below it. But what she did before they were allowed to do this task, she split the group in two, and one group watched a video which was just emotionally neutral. It was just an emotionally neutral video. And the other half of the group watched something that was funny. And what was interesting is the group that had watched something funny, twice as many of them solved the puzzle than the ones that hadn't. And what her research showed is actually humour helps us overcome that functional fixedness. It helps broaden our minds, opens our minds up. And if we think about in psychological safety as well, humour helps us relax. It helps us have fun and really challenge any fear that we might have. So humour can be a really great tool when we want to be creative. And we just want to create that psychological safety and helping people relax and helping people open up their minds. So how can you bring a bit of humour to your meetings and encourage your team to laugh? So how does humour help? Helps us challenge our thinking, think differently, and actually see the possibilities within scenarios. And moving on from that, so when we've used humour, people relaxed, it's how can we practice imaginative thinking, mixing ideas. So what if, so again, this helps challenge that functional fixedness. Actually, what if rather than seeing this chair as something we sit on, what if we could use it for something different? And where would we go? What would we do? And I've got an example of this. So we at Laughology love something called thunks. This is where they're questions where we get different ideas, throw them together and have a bit of fun of what they think. So got 2 thunks for you. I'd like you to share in the chat. Can you have an invisible toy? What do we think? And can you touch the wind? So can you have an invisible toy and can you touch the wind? What are our people's thoughts around that? What comes up for people? Is those things possible? So yeah, this is just an example of a thunk of getting 2 different things and having a think about that to sort of stimulate some different thinking. So I see in the chat where you've got yes and yes, yeah. Yes, okay, everyone agree that we can have an invisible toy. What would it be an invisible, what people, everything is possible, imagination has no limit. Yeah, fantastic, Melissa. What would an invisible toy be, do we think? I'm curious now to see what an invisible toy could be your mind. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, if anyone had, what do they call them? Invisible friends, pretend friends. They were technically an invisible toy if anyone has that. Regularly have an invisible stress queen toy. I like that, Emily. Yeah, really, really great. So yeah, some children have invisible friends, and actually there's some research around sort of imaginary friends and how that can show a level of creativity as well at a young age. So yeah, an example though of just mixing up ideas and yeah, really just playing around, asking questions, trying some things, just to get people started in a meeting if you're wanting to try out those, get people warmed up for some creative thought. So we're going to move on then. We've talked about inclusivity, diversity, we've talked about the power of humour and curious questions. Now I want you to think about your boardroom. So we talked about something about the rebel boardroom. So often unintentionally, we are drawn to people, our biases, we're drawn to people that are like us. But what can then sometimes happen is when we go to people to ask questions or ask for feedback, they will probably give you maybe feedback that you want to hear as opposed to things that may challenge you. And so what we really want you to do is thinking about how could you broaden your rebel boardroom, if you like? How could you create a rebel boardroom of people that maybe have diverse perspectives from you, maybe have different experience from you, maybe give you a different response than what you would normally expect? And actually, what could come from that? What new ideas could come from that? What new powerful feedback could come from development? So thinking about how can we get outside of our circle of advice. So for example, if you maybe do things, you may have unintentionally got stuck in working just within your department. Who outside of your department could you go and ask for some feedback about how this particular project might work? Who out of your friendship group could you go and speak to that you maybe wouldn't normally ask for their opinion? And what impact might that have on how you do things and your viewpoint? And actually what we know is the more we can broaden our perspectives and get different viewpoints, it can really help us learn. And again, thinking about that creativity, that collective intelligence, it will enhance your collective intelligence. And because you will see the world through your experience and your knowledge, but actually when we go to somebody who has a different life experience, it can really open up our viewpoint and how we do things. Really interesting. This morning I was out for a run and randomly I met somebody I'd never met before, and I learned all about he was a mole chaser. that was what he did for a job. So I spent this morning and he was telling me all about soils and mold tasting, something I never knew anything about. And he was from a very different background from me. But that was a highlight of my morning actually, because I love learning. I was learning something new, and that was just from walking down the street, and randomly he was asking for directions, and then he told me all about molds. That's just the power of when we speak to people who maybe have different backgrounds. It's like, oh, what could they open up for us? They really just wanted to give you a minute about actually who is in your sort of trusted circle of confidence, and actually how could you challenge yourself to go and speak to somebody different. What could you do? How could you speak to someone that you wouldn't normally speak to, and what might the impact be of that? So it'd be great to hear from you in chat about yeah, how could you broaden your circle? Who could you go and speak to that you wouldn't normally speak to in your organization or in your neighborhood? Is there a neighbor that you can speak to? So just have a ponder for that for a minute, in terms of who is in your trusted circle and how could you broaden that and speak to somebody different who could give you a different perspective. So I'll just give you sort of a minute to think about that, and then please feel free to share in the chat about how you might, challenge yourself to speak to someone differently. Anybody got any thoughts of how they can broaden their circle to speak to people to get a different perspective from what they normally would? Any thoughts on that from anybody? Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, Amanda, have someone who's more detailed than you, and the complete opposite, seek him out. Yes, that's really good. Yeah, we actually at Laughology we do a bit of profiling and the different preferences people work with. So, sort of the more influencer versus the more detailed, and that can be really helpful in getting those different perspectives. So yeah, great one, Amanda. Thank you for that. So yeah, I mean, something to really take away and have a think in terms of yourself, but also your team. Who do you go to? How do you get more diverse perspectives? Um, Brilliant. We've got some great stuff coming up. As a trainer, you get feedback all the time, but always good to get a group together to get feedback. Yeah, that as a trainer, feedback is really valuable, isn't it? Um, yeah. Oh, your junior team members. Yes, that's a really great one, Louise. In fact, there is a bit of a movement in terms of reverse mentoring. So rather than mentoring people more senior, I remember speaking to a director who was getting reverse mentored by a young person around social media and YouTube because she realised she needed to know about that stuff. So yeah, a really great one there as well. Yeah, attending different trade group meetings and visualize their development holistically rather than seeing it as a linear. Yeah, fantastic. Oh, brilliant. Some great stuff come out from there. So thank you very much, everybody. So yeah, and really just go away, maybe something to ponder on a bit more, as I said, for yourself and then for your teams in terms of who's in your boardroom and how could you diversify who you speak to. Yeah, Pam, yeah, conflict isn't a bad thing. Conflict can be really constructive if we use it properly, and we know that development and innovation has come from conflict sometimes in terms of it brings those two different ideas together and how we can work together. So yeah, Pam, I like that. That's a real challenge for yourself, and yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what comes out of that as well. So your rebel boardroom, a great thing to go away and think about, and keep a check on as well. Actually, regularly check in of who are you going to about things and make sure you're getting those diverse viewpoints. And then just finally, so I want to talk about the Pygmalion effect. This is about how our beliefs about others can sort of impact how so we might prejudge people, and actually those prejudgments can become fulfilling prophecies in terms of how we respond and act with the people. So for example, it might be that someone started in a role and someone comes up to you and goes, oh, I wouldn't speak to them. And so you've just taken that as gospel, you've never even spoken to them. And actually they could have some really valuable insights for you. And one of my favourite stories that really sort of highlights the Pygmalion effect. Carol Dweck, I talked about her early on in the session. She sort of is a Harvard professor, and she created the whole growth mindset theory. She loads of research into it. She wrote a great book called Mindset, which is all of details all of it, and it talks. She's got lots of case studies in there. Anyway, within there, she talks about this wonderful teacher in Chicago called Marva Collins, and she took a group of young students, and basically these students had been written off as learning disabled essentially, and the school that they were in had basically said there was no hope for them. And these students were sort of 5 or 6, really early on in their education. And Marva Collins was like, no, I'm not having that. I'm not having that. She's like, I'm going to teach them. And she went in, she's like, she started the year and she had this belief that actually all of these children had so much potential and capability within them. And so that was the belief that she went in. She saw the potential in all of her students. She believed they were all intelligent. And what was amazing, so these students couldn't read, they'd been written off as not capable of reading. And by the end of the year, they were all reading. And all their sort of results had all gone up. And one of those students, 2 years later, read 26 books over a summer period, which included all the classics. And I think that's an amazing story for the power to really highlight the power of like what we believe about somebody and how that influences how we respond to them. So are you seeing the potential in everybody around you? Are you seeing the potential and the contributions and the creativity and valuing the ideas? Or are you writing them off before you've even given a chance to speak to them? So really sort of thinking about your own beliefs about others and how they influence how you respond to them and how you act towards them, and sort of the impact that can have on themselves. Because if you don't see the potential in somebody, and then sort of maybe don't give that person that time, that could actually after a while really begin to affect someone's confidence. So yeah, really sort of thinking about actually how we think about others directly impacts the behaviour and attitude that we have towards other people. And that can impact on how they feel about themselves. So really having that growth mindset, that curious mindset, and seeing the potential in other people and really valuing their thoughts and creativity that can come from that. So that is the Pygmalion effect. And again, it's something to really think about in terms of your team, and the people that you work with and customers, anybody really, and really what would it be like to walk around thinking that I really see the potential in everybody and the potential creativity in everybody, what difference that might make. To Pygmalion effect there. And so finally, coming towards the end of this webinar, and I feel like I've been a bit fly by night of inclusion and creativity. But what one thing will you commit to following this webinar to build an inclusive and creative safe environment? So we've talked about psychological safety, we talked about the power of humour, curious questions and creative thinking, challenging yourselves in terms of your rebel boardroom and who is in your rebel boardroom. So what are you going to do differently? And that's, you can feel free to share in the chat what that might be. Be great to hear from you, anything that you're going to do differently following this webinar. Approach issues with curiosity as opposed to a closed mindset. Yeah, fantastic, Emily. It'd be great to see what impact that has. So again, feel free to share anything that you're going to do following this webinar. And then finally, thank you very much for coming along. We love to have you. Got a QR code. We love feedback. Please get the QR code and give us any feedback. And if you'd like to know more, just get in touch. Been great to have you all. So you're more curious and find a rebel boardroom. Yes, fantastic. Love that. Celebrate failures as well as successes. Yes, celebrate failures. It means you're trying. Curious and courageous questions. We continue to push. Brilliant. Try to find ways to get people out and moving to open themselves up to new ideas. Yes, brilliant. Some great takeaways there. Thank you everyone for sharing. And yeah, I will please sign up on the QR code, give us some feedback, and I'm going to stop sharing. And if anyone's got any questions, I'll be around for a little bit. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Yes, humour does help learning. Yeah.